Great dive from Claire. That's the dive of the meet so far. Beautiful hurdle step, so high. Could barely even hear her touch the end of the board, and then drills the entry to 66 points. That's a great start from Claire. Now Elizabeth Powley. You may recognise her from yesterday in the women's 10-metre event. There's only her and Corinne that did both the platform and the springboard. A little bit of a shame there from Elizabeth. Just left the dive slightly short. Got a good takeoff. Lots of height out of the board. Just needs to just keep that head down so she can spot her somersaults and know exactly where to come out. Sometimes if you start looking behind you when you're spinning around, you get a little bit unaware and unsure of where you are in the rotations. Now Tilly. She's doing an in-between half somersaults piked as well. Nice dive from Tilly. Really, really nice pike shape. See her arms wrapped around the back of her legs, chest flat on her knees. Just seeing the sixes there, just a little bit low finishing on the water. And judges would like to see a little bit more of a drop. It's allowed to get a bit of a cleaner entry to give those higher marks out. Now Lana doing the in-between of some sorts of tuck. Common progression for these divers can go from the in-between of some sorts of tuck to the pike that we've just seen later on. But it's a very nice dive from Lana. Great takeoff, stands up nice and tall, gets plenty of height out the board, and a really, really nice tuck shape too. Good scores there. Just let that chest move out very, very slightly, which is why you saw the tiny bit of splash thrown up. But the majority of the dive was very, very nice. Great tuck shape, like I said. Came out, just didn't quite get the full rip that she could have done. Now Brooke, for 2.5 somersaults pike. This one's just a 2.4. So execution is important. Very nice from Brooke as well. Very steady diving. A few little bits to neaten up roundabouts in that dive. But on the whole, sixes from the judges. Steady sixes, sometimes I like to say. Now the last of our guests, again from Sweden, Elna. She's going for the in-between half in the tuck position this time. She's opting for the slightly lower degree of difficulty at 2.7. So it is quite a big jump up going to the pike shape. 0.3 increase. Very nice dive from Elna. Another start that just climbed nicely up in the air with good balance. And that just gave her the control and drop into the water. So she had a very nice finish too. Good start from Elna.
I do like.
Now Amy. She's going for the in-between half somersaults pike. Amy, of course, joined us for the women's synchro as well. Great to have her in the box. Oh, wow, great takeoff from Amy. Absolutely cruise on. That's the easiest of the in-between half pikes that we've seen. Made it with ease, but just a little bit too much ease for this prelim. Didn't quite keep her head up enough to come out early and just finish it off. She had plenty of time there to take a look at the water and then just show off her rip entry. Just maybe over-pumped a little bit in this first round. First round is often the most nervy of the divers' lists, which is why people tend to put one that's a bit more comfortable for them. Clara's comfortable one potentially is about 1.5 somersaults with 1.5 twists. A very nicely executed dive from her. This one's down at 2.4 in the degree of difficulty, but very nicely executed there from Clara. 6.5s to count, so the all-important execution marks are relatively high. Now our last diver of the first round. with another 2.4. Forward 2.5 somersaults pike from Corinne. Very good dive from Corinne. Again, with it being a little bit lower on the degree of difficulty, it's important that you ensure you show off those little bits to the judges, anything that you can do just to get those extra marks on the board. Now you can see the results after the first round of dives coming up on your screen. Claire Cryan, as I said, the dive of the competition so far with a beautiful forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist. Catherine Torrens similarly did the same dive, again very, very nicely, 63 points from her. Now we look down to 9th to 16th, and then there's your 17th to 19th place. So heavy competition, still very early days, so there's going to be lots of changes in the rankings. Not look too much into the qualifiers just yet. Obviously top 8 go through to the final. For the guests, they have to come in the top 8 and be the top 2 guests too. Now Catherine with her next dive, hoping to keep up with the same standard as her first one. She's been given the extra challenge and extra pressure of having to hit a score at this event, which is a very difficult position to be in as a diver. But a good dive there from Catherine. This is a dive that she's found tough over the last few years, but looks like she's had some good progress on that. Staying up nice and tall. Getting not as much height out of the board as we're used to seeing from Catherine. She uses the springboard so well. She's got some of the best board time in the entire world, I believe. And she's bouncing on the board. You very rarely hear the stamp sound. It's just very quiet and smooth. Now Deshawn, the highest degree of difficulty dive we see in anyone's list today. 3.1 for the forward 3.5 somersaults pike. Very good recovery from Deshawn. I don't know if you could see on the hurdle step, she was very close to the corner, coming towards us on this side of the pool. She held on, pushed the board strongly, went a little bit sideways, which I think is the reason for Judge Seven's low score, but did very well to hold on to that hurdle step. Now Maya is going for a reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. Oh, we saw with the boys the other day, the hurdle steps are a real challenge. You may think it looks easy just walking down to the end of the board, but when you've got big dives to go on the end of it and you have to attack the end of the board, that's a great recovery from Maya. Oh, it's a real shame. Had all the elements of a great dive in there, jumped so high, great balance, good tuck shape, just kicked her feet very slightly too high. So the judges will mark out of 10 as they normally would, and then the restart will result in a 2-point deduction. So the scores that you're seeing there have had the 2 points deducted from them. Real shame there from Maya. The dive in itself, I think it was a good decision to restart, because if she'd have taken the dive from where she originally was, she potentially might not have been able to get all the rotations in. Now Amelia, she's got forward 3.5 somersaults pike, same as Deshawn. Oh, again, just compared to what I've seen her doing training, not quite the same standard. That is one of the hardest things about diving. You can train 10 minutes before an event and look like a world beater, and then 1 or 2 things change in the event itself and can have a calamitous effect. So real shame there from Amelia. She's still got 3 dives to recover. Katie Burton, another forward direction, just with the 1 less somersault. But very nicely executed from Katie. The hurdle step dropped into the end of the board with perfect straight line, so she gave herself every opportunity to get all the height out of the board that she can. Then she controlled, had a tee out of the pike shape, looked for the water, and then finished it off with an upright entry. Now Yasmin, a slightly uncharacteristic drop on her forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist. Still 51 points, so wasn't a major drop, but not quite the standard that we're used to seeing from her, and she expects from herself as well, I think would be fair to say. This round back 2.5 somersaults pike. That's more like it from Yasmin. Makes these back and reverse dives probably one of the easier ones in the whole competition. Puts her feet out quite low and then just reaches those arms back behind her ears. Probably pulled slightly too much, if anything. Those feet just slightly over-rotating, but still kept the water down very well. So we see good scores from the judges. Now Callie, she's doing the same dive. Nice to compare the differences between the two. A very nice dive from Callie. Really accurate on the entry. Good form in the pike shape. Her leg line and toe point very, very nice in that pike shape. So you see similar scores, slightly less than Yasmin. I think that's just because the judges recognise that Yasmin kicked her feet out so early. She made the dive so easily that impressed the judges and helped them give her slightly more scores. Now Lauren, forward 3.5 somersaults pike. Oh, just not getting all those rotations in. It looked to me as if she just didn't quite get all the height out of the board that we're used to seeing from her. She's strong, she can really cruise around on these pike dives normally. Just looked a bit reserved on the hurdle step. Didn't quite attack the end of the board as she can do. Trains in Southampton. Lindsay Fraser, her coach. Now Scarlett Mew Jensen, another person who had a little bit of an uncharacteristic drop on her 2.5 pike. Reverse 2.5 pike. I'd say this is probably the riskiest dive in Scarlett's list for her. Great hurdle step. Oh, such a shame. The hurdle step was beautiful. Had everything she needed to get massive scores on that dive. Just the awareness, not quite there. Kicked her feet up a little bit too high and just goes sailing over. Now Evie, she followed Scarlett's 2.5 pike in the first round. She changing up her list order here. She's going for the forward 3.5 somersaults tuck next. Great dive from Evie. Had a little bit of a panic on her hurdle step. She just stepped off the end of the board, but what's really impressive about that dive is she had the composure to not panic, let the springboard do the work for her, jump up into the air and then finish off the end. So sometimes when you are back on the end of the board, it's really important that you just trust your body, trust your strength in your legs to get out of the board, even when it is a little bit tighter the further back you are. Now Claire, leader after the first round with that beautiful forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist. He goes for a back 2.5 somersaults tuck. Again, nice dive from Claire. Just slightly over from vertical. Claire's got a very good knee save, so even when she is in that position, just slightly over, she can pull her knees in and just keep the water down. So I was still see the sixes, so not a drop whatsoever. Not quite as high scores as we know she can get. She has changed the shapes of her dives over the years. She's opting for the easy one in the tuck position currently. That's much more like it from Elizabeth. One of the harder dives in her list. The joint hardest degree of difficulty dive in her list, but very nicely executed. Great hurdle step, good rhythm, and able to get plenty of height out of that board. And then a very steady finish too. Much more like it from Elizabeth. Now Tilly, with her forward 3.5 somersaults tuck. Another good recovery from Tilly, similar to Evie earlier in the competition. Just a little bit back on that hurdle step. But again, was very accurate with where she was on that entry. Squeezed really tight into a very nice tuck shape and then came out at the perfect time just to ensure she got that upright entry. Lana's going to follow her with the exact same dive, sorry. Oh, Lana's got the opposite problem there. We saw Tilly and Evie being quite back off the end of the board, which at least your full foot is on the board, so you can still push as hard as you can. Lana there, half of her foot was over the end of the board, so if you push too hard in that position, give yourself a large risk of slipping on the board. You can't get the full height out of the springboard that you would like to for those dives, so unfortunately Lana just didn't quite fit all the somersaults in like she would normally do. Now Brooke, back 2.5 somersaults tuck. This one's 2.8 degree of difficulty. Oh, that's a shame there from Brooke. Used the springboard really well on the start. You can see the rocks that she's doing, getting the board moving. And then she did get out of the springboard really well as well. She got plenty of height. Just threw her head back slightly in that tuck shape and needed to get a bit tighter in there to spin faster and help her just get all those rotations in. Now Elna. We saw her with a very nice in-between half somersaults tuck in the first round. Being a little bit lower on the degree of difficulty, sees her with the 52 points instead of a little bit higher, but the execution marks were very nice. And again, I think we're going to see reasonable execution marks. A lot to like about that dive. Very nice pike shape. I think the judges maybe just would like to see a little bit more confidence on that entry. Kick those feet out to a dish, then the divers will look back and line up. A skill that they'll often practice in the dry areas, just on the floor, to get strength in those different positions, and then they can replicate them in the air. Now Amy, forward 3.5 somersaults pike. Oh, again, those hurdle steps causing some issues. Amy back on the end of the board. She's strong enough to push through it with a big jump out of the springboard, but just not enough to get the hard forward 3.5 somersault in. Our penultimate diver of the second round, Clara Kerr. I mentioned previously that Grace Reed has had a late pull out from this competition, which is a real shame, but Clara again with a beautiful dive. She's a little bit lower down on the degree of difficulty with the back twist in the first round and the back 2.5 tuck in that round, but so far with the execution being absolutely beautiful. And our last diver of the second round is Corinne. Going for an in-between half somersaults tuck. Nice dive from Corinne. Again, you can notice the ankle rocks. Divers like to rock on the board on the back takeoffs just to get the springboard moving, and then that enables them to get a bit more push into the springboard and help them jump a little bit higher into the air. So that's the end of the second round. Very shortly have the results on the screen after round 2. Deshawn just takes the lead in front of Claire Cryan. Catherine Torrens hot on the heels, and Yasmin Harper with a little bit of a recovery after a slight first round drop from her. We've got that battle for the qualification places, of course. Elizabeth Powley currently in there due to the guests above her. Claire Cryan and Elna Widerstrom are our top 2 guests currently, and they are also in the top 8, so they will be going through to the final as it stands. Now Catherine, forward 3.5 somersaults pike. I've previously mentioned this is the highest degree of difficulty dive in the whole competition. Yes, Catherine, very nice. When she hit the end of the board, she was in a perfect straight line. Really good hurdle step. Gave herself every opportunity to get that big dive in. And I think she'll be pretty happy with that. This morning's prelim. Sometimes it can be a little bit harder in the morning. Body's not fully woken up, and the afternoon's finals often see the higher scores. Judges are often a little bit kinder in the afternoons too. Now Deshawn, back 2.5 somersaults pike. Current leader. Again, so easy from Deshawn. She's so strong, she makes these dives very, very easily. Just kicked her feet out a little bit too high, which is why we're not seeing the big scores. Those feet sailing a little bit over from vertical. Now Maya. I mentioned that the in-between half somersaults piked is one that a lot of divers find harder than some of the other pikeless dives. Maya doing it before doing the reverse 2.5 in the pike position. So she's clearly favourable on this one. Just left it slightly short of vertical there. Good balance. Just didn't quite get the height out of the board that she would need to get all of that dive in. Now Amelia, not quite up to the standard that she probably expects of herself after the first 2 rounds. That's much more like it. I really, really like the takeoff there. She's strong and brings her legs up straight into that pike shape. Sometimes when the girls lack the strength and the speed, you can see the legs come up a little bit crimped. Amelia doesn't do that there. Very nice out of the springboard. Katie with the reverse 2.5 in the tuck position. 0.2 down again. Not seen as much variation in the degree of difficulty in the female event as we did see in the male event a couple of days ago. Just over-rotating slightly there from Katie. Good thing about a dive in the tuck position, if you are over-rotating, clearly means that you're making the dive well enough, and there's potential to see increased degree of difficulty up to the pike position too. And that's a positive that Katie can take out of that. Now Yasmin. Recovered after a first round dive which scored 51 points. She'd probably expect the dive up to the 60 plus mark, so now she uses her highest degree of difficulty dive, but cruises round, makes it look very, very easy. Forward 3.5 somersaults pike is not an easy dive for these girls, in general at least, but Yasmin makes it look very comfortable for her there. 6.5 to count from the judges, 60 points for her, so very steady mark for this morning's prelim. Of course, the divers want to score as high as they can in this prelim, but the most important thing for them is to ensure that they're in the mix and competing in this afternoon's final. Callie with the same dive, another very well executed dive from her. She's up to DD over the last couple of years. She started doing these events quite a few years ago now. Very different look back then, very small. Now she's grown and developed, much stronger. She can do these bigger dives. Lauren's third round dive is a back 2.5 somersaults pike. Very good save from Lauren. When she kicked her feet out there, I thought that they might just rotate over a little bit, but she held them very strong. And I previously mentioned about Claire Cryan's knee save. Just when you hit the water, you pull those knees in nice and tight to your chest and keep that water down. Lauren did that very, very well there. Scarlett's doing the same dive, back to 2.5 somersaults pike. And not quite up to the standard we expect from Scarlett. I mentioned that her forward spinning dives are normally ones that are really consistent. Back and reverse, not quite as much as her forward dives. That back 2.5 pike is normally a very high scoring dive for her too, but unfortunately just didn't quite reach her arms back enough behind her ears on the entry to get that rip through the water. Evie's going for a reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. That's a much better hurdle step from Evie. In the last round, she left herself with a bit of work to do being off the end of the board, but that was much better. Again, a very nice dive. Sometimes just choosing a slightly easier option for these girls doing the tuck dive can mean you can just show a little bit more elegance off. Evie does that with a great kick out and a good rip there. Now Claire scrapping it out at the top of the leaderboard currently. She was in second place, just a point behind Deshawn. She's got her high degree of difficulty dive. Forward 3.5 somersaults pike again. Very nice dive from Claire. She was a little bit on the corner of the board there. Very close to our side of the board, but again, had the strength to push in, squeeze into that pike shape and get the dive all the way around. So from that position on the springboard, I'm sure she'll take that dive, especially in this morning's prelim. Now Elizabeth with forward 3.5 somersaults in the tuck position. Another good dive from Elizabeth. He was right there in the rankings to get through to the final after the last round, and she definitely won't have done herself any harm with that dive. Another really high jump out the springboard. Used the board really, really well. Very quiet on the springboard, which gives you an idea of the rhythm that the divers have on the springboard. So great dive there from Elizabeth. Now Tilly, sticking with the tuck dives. She's back to a standing dive now though, back 2.5 somersaults. Another nice dive there from Tilly. Great tuck shape, kicks her feet out at the right time and goes through the water very clean too. So good to see those 7s on the board for her from the judges. Up towards that 60 mark too, so great score and great dive from Tilly. Tilly and Lana now following the directions all the way through. Inward, forward, back, reverse and twist is their list order, just slightly different in some of the choices. Oh, that's a shame there from Lana. Just kicked her feet out too early. The position of the dish was very flat, very nice, but unfortunately just when you're a little bit early there with your feet, they can just drop and means you land very short of vertical, which Lana's done there. So, real shame. Now Brooke doing her reverse, of course, spinning backwards, moving forwards. Oh, another dive that's just not quite getting all the rotations in. When you're doing these tuck dives, it's really important that you are confident in squeezing tight in that tuck shape. Strange thing about diving is it's not a sport where you can just try harder and that means everything gets better. So much technique involved. Made the reference to golf the other day. Sometimes you can swing a golf swing and clip a ball that doesn't feel like you've tried as hard but goes miles further. Similar thing in diving. For any of you golf fans, Eleanor with a beautiful dive again. Been very impressed with her execution so far today. That one's a harder one at the 3.0 for the reverse 2.5, but beautiful nevertheless. Now, come on, Amy. We know that Amy's more than capable of getting some big scores on this Springboard event. Oh. Another hurdle step causing a little bit of issues. This is the newest dive in Amy's list. She's competed this dive tuck in the last few years. Now choosing to up the degree of difficulty to pike. It does mean she just needs that extra perfect hurdle. Not quite got it there. But great recovery there from Amy. One of the hardest things to do is when you've bulked once, to get a good hurdle the second time round is so difficult. Turns out that I think that was a good choice from her. 6.5s and 6s from the judges that count, down to 4.5s and a 4 with the 2-point deduction for the restart. So we've got 2 rounds left for Amy to recover. He's definitely a person that we would like to see this afternoon's final because she can be such a strong diver and is more than capable of getting up there and challenging for the medals. Clara reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. Oh, the first drop we've seen from Clara, the first 2 dives were very nicely executed. She's got good form in her dives and good rips. Unfortunately, just left that one short of vertical, so couldn't show us off that rip entry. Very difficult to do that in that position. And our last diver of the 3rd round, back to Corinne. Another one of our junior divers, still only competing in the Group B event last year. So great for her to gain some experience at this event. Plenty more junior years to come for her too. Back 2.5 somersaults tuck. Managed to get it upright. Just a little bit of panic on that come out. Arched her back slightly, which is why we're only seeing the 5s rather than any higher. So 3 rounds in. Well underway with the competition now. The shaping of the scores, of the rankings, sorry, starting to take a little bit more of an important look. 2 rounds left. Claire Cryan in first, 172, a good score after 3 dives. Again, top 8 British qualify. So currently we have 4 guests in the top 8. So unfortunately for Lauren and Amelia at the moment, they're 3rd and 4th in our guest competition, mini guest competition. Now Catherine, currently in 3rd place, 168, only 0.05 of a point behind Yasmin in 2nd. She's got her reverse 2.5 somersaults pike. This was the dive that she did drop in the synchro, but we do know that she can do it very well. And nearly there. Good takeoff out of the board. Plenty of height. Good leg line out of the springboard too in that pike shape. Just didn't quite get the rip entry through the water that we know she can do. Needed a little bit more confidence on the come out. Now Deshawn. Also on 168. There's 3 divers there on 168, all within 0.1 of each other. Oh, Again, so easy for Deshawn. Slight issue, and when she kicked her feet out there, you just enable you to see both of them. Means that the feet have just split apart. So whether our judges spot that or not, you can see probably Judge 2 didn't with the 7.5, Judge 7 did with the 5.5. So just depending on where the judges are sat, might just affect whether they could see that or not. But great dive, so easy. Just needed to keep those feet together to really get the big scores. Maya with a forward 3.5 somersaults tuck. Good dive there from Maya. Spinning around nicely in that tuck shape. And then again, finishing off the dive with a very clean entry. She's got nice, neat and tidy diving. Maya with good form. Very important for these girls, especially when they do similar lists. You have to stand out in certain ways, and having form and elegance in your diving is one of the best ways to stand out. Amelia, that's more like the diving I've seen from her in training. Forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist. Beautiful dive from her. Great rip entry through the water. 61.5 points. So she's back in the battle for the top 2 guest spots, putting the pressure on her Swedish counterpart, Elna. Now Katie up to a standing dive in 2.5 somersaults tuck. Very good dive there from Katie. She pikes out very early, doesn't quite straighten out the hips fully on the water, just stays slightly piked to the hips, which is why we're going to see just the 5s. She does make that dive very, very easily. Just needed to squeeze those hips in, get a perfect straight line through the water to see even higher scores. And Yasmin, second, just after the last round. There was only 0.1 points between her, Catherine, and Deshawn, so all very, very close. She's got reverse 2.5 somersaults pike. Nearly there from Yasmin. I was going to say before the dive that this is probably the dive in her list that has the potential to score the highest. She can do this dive so well in the synchro event with Catherine. She nailed the entry, kicked her feet out at the water, looked back and lined up with very little splash. That one's similar to Deshawn earlier, just let those feet come apart on the entry. Judges have penalised her a little bit more heavily. She was a little bit short vertical too. Now Kelly, mentioned about the increase in difficulty from her. She's doing majority of her dives pike now. Now we saw Amelia put the pressure on our other guests. Lauren's got to do the same here with her reverse 2.5 somersaults pike. Again, very, very nice from Lauren. These girls are all putting pressure on each other. The little mini competition within the competition we have. Only the top 2 guests can go through. Great dive there from Lauren. Now come on, Scarlett. 2 dives left. Enough time to recover herself and get into that final. This is her highest degree of difficulty and perhaps her best dive. Oh, just not quite what we used to see from Scarlett. Just left it a little bit short of vertical. It's a real shame because we want to see her into the final. She's given herself a little bit more work than she would like to do. Still 10 divers left to go. She is currently in 10th place with quite a few guests above her though, so again we go top 8 GB divers. Evie Smith with a back 2.5 somersaults pike. More steady diving from Evie. Up in the degree of difficulty on this one, opting for the pike shape rather than tuck shape. She did the forward 3.5 and the reverse 2.5 in the tuck shape. This one up to 3.0, so obviously the increased degree of difficulty means the increased personal difficulty as well. But very steady diving from Evie. Managed to get that dive upright onto her head. Giving herself every chance to get in and around those qualification positions. Now all the guests are putting pressure on each other. Claire again to go with the reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. And again steady, not quite the top of her range, just left it short of vertical. A lot of good stuff in there, good form, and the kick out just left the dive short, so not the rip entry that we're used to seeing from Claire. Bit of a mixed bag so far. Really, really nice forward 2.5 somersaults in the forward 2.5 somersaults, one twist in the first round. Back and reverse haven't quite been the same standard. Elizabeth with a beautiful reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. Kicked her feet out in the perfect position. Great entry on the water as well. Really, really nice dive from Elizabeth. She was towards the back end of the top 8, so she's not given anyone behind her any opportunity to catch up any points with that dive. Tilly also currently in our top 8. She's got the same dive, reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. Another good dive from Tilly. Great tuck shape. She keeps her eyes down, chin in, and then squeezes into a really, really nice tuck shape. Knees nice and tight together. Squeeze into a good ball-looking shape. Just enables you to get those rotations in nice and fast and comfortably make that dive round. Now the third reverse 2.5 somersaults we see in a row, all in the tuck position. Just left slightly short of vertical from Lana. Real shame after the first round from Lana was very promising. The last couple of rounds not quite been up to the same standard as the first round. So she just given herself a few problems to get into that final. Now Brooke, forward 2.5 somersaults with one twist. Snuck that entry in. It's interesting to see the different timings of the flick on this dive from different divers. Some opt to flick a little bit earlier, especially if they've got that extra bit of height. When you do flick earlier, it just means you give yourself a little bit more awareness of having a look at that water, and then give yourself the best chance to squeeze those hands and get a good rip entry into the water. Eleanor's doing the same dive, so we can get a direct comparison of that. Another beautiful dive from Eleanor. These guests are giving each other a real hard time, not giving one another a chance to gain up any points. So far, so good from Eleanor. Hits in every single round. She puts herself up into second position currently, and she will finish the round in second, just behind Deshawn, who's currently our leader. I mean, I don't know how Amy has done that dive from where she was. On the springboard, you can see, or you might be able to see from the cameras there, little holes towards the springboard. She's landed that far back that she's barely making any contact with the holes anymore. So to just be able to get that dive in is very impressive in itself. Unfortunately, it's not going to mean that much to Amy personally there, because she would expect much higher execution marks from herself there, and she's leaving herself with a lot of work to do on the last round to get into those qualification spots. Clara with another very nice executed dive in, which now some sorts took slightly lower down on the degree of difficulty, 2.7, but again, like we said in the first couple of rounds, if you choose to opt for those lower degree of difficulty dives, it's really important that you get those execution marks to get the points on the board. Something Clara is definitely doing. Currently in the spots to get through to the final. Our last diver, Corinne, for reverse 2.5, some sort of tuck. Again, good dive from Corinne. Kicked her feet out in the perfect place. Just instead of squeezing her bum in and lining up, she just left her bum out so she wasn't quite in a straight line. That just means that the splash is going to catch off the parts of your body that are sticking out a little bit. So not quite the same rip entry she would get otherwise. There you can see our results going into the last round. Again, it's very tight at the top, just 0.2 between first and second. We have 4 guests in our top 8 currently, so it will go down to 12th position in the overall rankings for our top 8 GB divers. So there is Evie Smith currently in 12th place, squeezing into that final. We can only have a maximum of 10 people, top 2 guests go through. So currently Eleanor and Claire, Lauren and Amelia hot on the heels. Amelia is 12 points behind Claire and Lauren is 10. So all to play for in this last round. Now Catherine in 3rd position currently. 216 is the score she was on after 4 rounds. Now a target of hers will be to score around that 300 mark. She looks like she's going to be safely through to that final, so she gives herself every opportunity of doing that later on, and we're in the final, and the scores are potentially flowing a little bit more lucratively. Steady dive there from Catherine, not quite as sharp as we've seen her do, but as to be expected in a morning's prelim sometimes. A little bit of a drop on the scores. There's a lot of dive these girls do. She is really good at making sure that she gets the legs out of the board straight, which sometimes can be one of the things the judges will look for, that they will penalise divers for. Catherine doesn't have that problem. Now Deshawn, she finishes up with an in between half somersaults pike. Can she keep that top spot for the prelim? Very nice from Deshawn. I think that's going to give her a very good opportunity of keeping the top spot going into later on's final as the top qualifier. 61.5 points from her. Now Maya. Currently in 17th place. So she's got quite a bit of work to do to catch up the girls to get into the final, but that is a very, very nice dive. Perfectly upright on the entry, very clean through the water too. So great dive for her to finish on. Her highest scoring dive of the event, 58.5 points on that one. Now Amelia mentioned previously that she was 12 points behind Claire. She's 25 points behind her teammate Elna. And steady, maybe not quite enough to put the pressure on. 12-point gap can be quite a bit of distance on these dives when they're all doing very similar degree of difficulty dives. Slightly over rotated there, so we're not going to see the highest execution marks. Again, made the dive very, very easily. .54 points there from Amelia, so she's giving herself a chance. If any of our other divers drop their last dive, and she's hot on the heels to take that spot in the final for our top two guests. Now Katie finishes up with a low degree of difficulty dive, just a 2.4 this one. But nicely executed from Katie. I said in the first round that divers can often start on dives that they're comfortable with, get themselves into the competition, let those nerves just settle a little bit. Similar thing at the end of the competition, divers can put a dive there that they're confident that they can score highly on. And if they know that they need to get a certain score in their head to get a certain ranking, give themselves the opportunity to do that. Yasmin finishes on her in-between-half somersaults pike. Nearly there from Yaz. She's made a lot of improvements on this dive in the last year or two. She did struggle to make this definitely comparable to some of her other pike dives in the last few years, but she's now enabling herself to get much more height out of the board. Good lift. Unfortunately, she just didn't quite get fully out of that pike shape there. Just stayed a little bit piked at the hips and continued that rotation. Now Callie, also currently in our final positions. Oh, good recovery there from Callie. Panicked a little bit. She looked like she was slightly over the end of the board, so she pushed herself quite far out into that pool, quite far away from the board, and that means it's very difficult to get yourself in a position to spin around fast enough and get enough height to dive in. Especially on a reverse takeoff, you don't get the help of lean to increase your rotation like you would on a forward takeoff. It hinders you, so she's done a good job at getting that dive in. Lauren with her final dive, she was 10 points behind Claire. She's done a 42.5 somersaults with one twist, 49.5 points, so again, it's going to need a little bit of a drop from Claire. Put the massive pressure on that she may have needed to do. Now Scarlett, someone that we would like to see in the final definitely, knowing the diving that she is capable of. Come on Scarlett. 42.5 somersaults with one twist. That's much more like it from Scarlett. Very nice dive from her. We will see if that does enough just to scrape her through to the final. Definitely not being the meet that she would have wanted, but very good last dive, gives her a chance. Now Evie following up with the same dive. She was a diver in 12th, but also being in 12th overall when she was top 8 in the GB competition. And another beautiful dive. Very, very nice from Evie. Scarlett's gone before her with the same dive, put a bit of pressure on her, but she's reacted so well there. Very, very nice dive from Evie. That looks like it will put Evie safely through to the final. Now Claire, in between half somersaults, tuck, lower down on the degree of difficulty. We've seen our guests that were trying to put the pressure on her go previously, so she knows what she needs to do. And that very, very nice dive will be enough to get Claire through to the final. In 2.5 somersaults tucked, so lower down in degree of difficulty, very important that the execution marks are there to count. 7s that are taken through from the judges. Of course, top 2 and bottom 2 scores from the judges are taken out. That's an attempt to get rid of any anomalies. Of course, it is a subjective sport, so different judges may have different opinions on the dives. Elizabeth Powley with an inward 2.5 somersaults pike 2. Again, she's been very consistent over the last 3 dives in this competition especially. 242 points, so that looks like it's going to put her into the final 2. Tilly was in 6th place, so again, looking like she's going to go through to the final if she can perform this dive very nicely, which she has done. We've seen some very good forward 2.5 somersaults with 1 twist. If I say the full out, that is the dive that I mean. Very nice dive again from Tilly. Safely through to the final. Good score, 2.66. Puts her into 3rd place. Now Lana back 1.5 somersaults with 1.5 twists. That's a little bit more like it from Lana. First round dive was good in the middle of the competition. Just had a few slips, which is a real shame, but finishes off strongly there with a back 1.5 somersaults with 1.5 twists. Brooke finishes her competition with the inward 2.5 somersaults tuck. Very nice dive from Brooke too. Great dive to finish on. Hopefully leave a good taste in her mouth for this competition, just with that higher score on her last dive. The last of our guests, Elna, and the forward 3.5 somersaults tuck. Again, very nicely executed from her. She was 2nd after the last round, and I don't think that's going to change the proceedings very much. Looking like she's going to be in the exact same position going into the final rankings. Good dive from her. She's been very steady throughout the whole competition. Showing real class. Good shapes, good form, good toe point and leg line. Nice diving from Elna. Now Amy, not the competition we know she can show. A good finish from her, back 2.5 somersaults pike. Real shame, because definitely wanted to see Amy through to the final. A dive that's more than capable of getting the 300 plus scores. It's very difficult when you come from a season. Obviously a lot of learning for her last season. Not in the synchro team this season, so can have a bit of an effect on someone's confidence. Now Clara, forward 3.5 somersaults tuck. She finishes up her list with again another one that's slightly lower down in the degree of difficulty. Might just have a little bit of effect. She was 10th after the last round, so she was going into that final, but after that last dive she's going to leave herself with a little bit of work to do. We'll have to see on the final rankings whether she has made it through or not. And our last diver of this morning's prelim. Corinne with her twisting dive. She's opting for a standing takeoff. The back 1.5 somersaults with 1.5 twists. And good dive for Corinne to finish on. Great sound as she hit the water. Contact with her hands on the water made a big clapping sound, which is a good sign that you're going to get a good entry through the water. So good finish there from Corinne. That concludes the women's 3-metre prelim. We will shortly have the results there and tell you who has made it through to this afternoon's final. Very hotly contested event, that one. Sometimes when you have 20 divers in an event, or 19, sorry, after Grace's pull out, real shame that Grace had to pull out of that event. Another diver that we would like to see, capable of such big scores. Obviously won this event many times in the past. Represented Team GB at the Olympics, medalled at the Commonwealth Games for Team Scotland. So of course we would like to see someone of Grace's calibre in this event, so that is a shame. But obviously the divers that we have got in the event showing some really good diving. A bit of a mixed bag from most of them this morning, as we sometimes would expect in a prelim. It is so difficult to do these dives in the pressure of getting through to the final. You don't want to make any mistakes. You don't want to be that one that misses out when you believe that you should be in that final, so it can put some extra pressure on. We will be back with the results in a couple of minutes, so just while they are processed, I will give you 2 minutes, and then hopefully we'll go through those results and tell you who has got through to this afternoon's final. I think we're just about ready to give you the results. Hotly competed event. You can see there's 4 guests in the top 8. Deshaun taking the top spot from the qualifications. Unfortunately for Amelia and Lauren, because they are the 3rd and 4th guests, they won't be going through to the final despite their great performances and getting into the top 8 overall. You can see there, Tilly Brown, Catherine Torrance, Yasmin Harper will all join Deshaun as the Brits. Elna and Claire will be our guests in the final. And then we will see on the next board the rest of our finalists will be Elizabeth Powley in 5th, Evie Smith 6th, Scarlett Mew-Jensen in 7th, and Callie Eaglestone in 8th. So unfortunately for Clara and Amy, just missing out there. Maya as well on 2:08, all 3 of those girls. Corinne not far behind, just 6 points off the final, so I'm sure they'll be disappointed. That is the challenge with these prelims in the morning. And the last few divers there, Katie Burton, Lana Webb and Brooke Ryan. So we will be back shortly with the men's 10-metre prelim, often known as the blue ribbon event. Of course, we get some amazing entries. Probably the event or the platform events are the ones that we're most likely to see those 10s into, so fingers crossed we'll see some more great diving, and we hope to see you back joining us very shortly. Welcome back to our coverage of the final day of the British National Diving Cup of 2023. Following up from this morning's women's 3-metre preliminary event, we have the men's platform preliminary event 2. I'm Jack Haslam and I'll be a commentator through this event. We're hoping to get some other familiar names joining us this afternoon to help you keep interested, not just listen to my voice throughout the whole of the diving competitions. The boys have done their last bits of training, now ready to scrap it out for those positions in the final. Start number 1 from Edinburgh in his home pool, Angus Memweir. Start number 2 from Dive London is Hamish Patel. Start number 3 from Dive London is Matthew Dixon. Start number 4 from Southampton Diving Academy is Brian James. Start number 6 from Dive London, Ben Cutmore. Start 7 from Southampton Diving Academy, Robbie Lee. Start 8 from Southampton Diving Academy is Oliver Covell. Start 9, another familiar name from Dive London, is Noah Williams. Start number 10 from Crystal Palace is Romano Wang. Start number 11 from Plymouth is Oliver Heath. Start number 12 from Dive London is Jordan Fisher Eames. And our last diver in this morning's prelim is Kyle Kuthari from London. The boys are looking good spirits. Obviously, quite a few of them train with each other, so there's really good relationships between these divers. Sometimes, often, outsiders looking in can find it strange how well these divers get along with each other, with them being competitors, but with the manner of diving that your dive don't necessarily affect someone else's. It's a sport that almost the best man wins, so everyone respects each other, and there's a lot of camaraderie between these athletes. So there you can see a hard copy of your start list. Previously mentioned some of the big names in this event. We're also missing a couple of names. Matty Lee, the reigning champion from the May 2022 Nationals, he is missing. He's got a stress fracture on his wrist at the moment, so he can't do any dives to hands. He's still been training. He's up here in Edinburgh doing a lot of feet first work, keeping his body in good shape, making sure all his techniques are ticking along just whilst he recovers and gets his wrist back in shape to get back up to the diving boards. Ewan McCabe, another name missing from the 10-metre event that we've seen in recent competitions. He's also struggling with injury. This 10-metre event really does take it out and take the stress out on your body. Wrists, shoulders, elbows, backs, all see the impact of hitting the water head first. Of course, you've also got your ankles and your knees when you're springing off a solid concrete platform. It really does take its toll on these guys' body. They put themselves through strenuous routines daily to get ready for events like this and hopefully qualify for some of the internationals later on in the competitions in the year. The judges are in place. Slightly different positions from the judges. Obviously, with the 3-metre boards, they need to be positioned differently to the 10-metre boards in order to get a better view so they can give a more well-rounded score. So whilst Angus makes that long journey up to the 10-metre, go through some of the dives that we're going to see today. Big scoring, big DD dives, forward 4.5 somersaults tuck. That's a 3.7. Up on the 10 metre, We see a large range of difficulty. The female event saw just one diver not going off the 10 metre, using the 5 and the 7 metre platforms. This event we're also going to see a little bit of use of those. That does, however, mean that those divers won't be able to qualify through to the final. It is a requirement to ensure every single one of your 6 dive list is on the 10 metre to enable you to qualify through to later on's final. On the platform, we have 6 directions: forward, back, reverse, inward, twist, and arm stand, which is an addition compared to the springboard. These divers will have to do 1 dive in each direction. Can choose the biggest variety that we see tend to be on the arm stands and the twist dives. Angus is starting his list off with the back 2.5 somersaults with 1.5 twists. In the pike position, this one's a 3.2 degree of difficulty. Actually used to be a 3.4 many moons ago when even I did the 10 metre board. This was a 3.4 degree of difficulty, so it's dropped down slightly. But still high up on that 3.2, gives the opportunity to get plenty of scores on the board for these divers. Angus starts off with a slight over-rotation on his back twisting dive. Nerves and adrenaline can just give you that extra bit of pump. So it's important that these divers are able to just control themselves and stop that rotation, get the rip entries through the water. Interesting to see there's quite a few of today's 10 metre divers that also did the springboard, so very difficult to enable yourself to train at the highest level on both of those boards. Hamish with a forward 3.5 somersaults pike. Another steady dive to start with. Not a massive hit, just kicking up a little bit of splash. 10 metres, one of those boards that gives you an opportunity to really wow the spectators with entries that just disappear through the water. Now Matthew Dixon, still very, very young, but feels like he's been around this event for a long time now. Of course, a previous champion. Won medals at Europeans, Commonwealth Games. Got some great accolades to his name. He starts off with a reverse 3.5 somersaults. Took this one's 3.4. Good start from Matthew. Very good jump on the takeoff. Makes an extra metre, so he's already 10 metres high up on the platform, but gives himself plenty of height out of the platform, sorry, to enable him to get all of those rotations round with plenty of time to kick his feet out, look where he is, and then line up for the finish. Not quite the rip entry we're probably used to seeing Matthew. Hopefully save that one for the final, but very steady start nevertheless. Now Brian, he's down on the 7.5 metre. In between half somersaults took. 7.5 metre and the 3 metre have the same degree of difficulty for the same dives. So you may have noticed this dive on the 3 metre earlier with the girls. Brian's doing it on the 7.5 metre, still 2.7, and a very nicely executed dive from him. Good rip sound as he hit the water. Steady start gets him into the competition. And Cutmore, we've already seen him once this weekend in the synchronised event. Him and Kyle did use this dive, performed it very nicely. One of the more recent additions to Ben's list. Previously did this with the 1.5 twist, now upping his DD by 0.4 to the 2.5 twists. And upping his DD, but keeping the standard very, very high. Great dive there from Ben. Got plenty of support here in the crowd. Loud noise. The judges only going with the 6s, I think, just penalising the split of legs in the middle of that dive when you're rotating around in your twist. There's a lot of force that's trying to pull your legs apart. Takes a lot of strength on the inner thighs to ensure you keep those feet together. Robbie's starting off with an arm stand. Saw Robin do a similar thing yesterday. Good sign of this means that Robbie is obviously very comfortable with his handstands. Good start from Robbie. Saw him do a few of these in training where didn't look quite aware. But that one, no such problem. Kicks his feet out. Just needed to hold his stomach a little bit tighter. But good start from Robbie. Now, down to the 5 metre. Oliver from Southampton, he's doing the in-between half somersaults tuck. Despite being down on the 5 metre, still quite high on the degree of difficulty, 3.1, and very nicely executed. The 5 metre and the 7 metre often seen as lead-up boards to the 10 metre. Oliver doing that dive nicely. Good sign that you can add another somersault on comfortably up on the 10 metre. Now a man that, again, plenty of accolades to his name. Starts with the same dive as his teammate Ben. Back 2.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists. We saw him go over 500 in one of the prelims last year, which is an amazing score. And again, that is an absolutely beautiful dive from Noah. Not much to critique about that myself. I think we could quite easily see even higher scores there from the judges. Maybe later on, if we did exactly the same dive, we might see those high scores. Noah, great diving. Gets himself up and underway in the competition with a nice 81 points. Now Romano. He's going with a forward 3.5 somersaults pike. So from the 3.6 from Noah, this one's a 3.0. Good dive from Romano, beautiful pike shape. And his legs wrapped around the back of his knees. Nice straight legs and chest flat on his legs. So great to see that one as he's spinning around in the air and finishes off the dive very nicely too. Now Oliver Heath. Into the 7.5 metre again. So we see 3 divers in this round using dives not on the 10 metre board. That does automatically mean that they can't go through to this afternoon's final. Very nice start from Oliver. Held that entry really, really well. I thought when he came out of his tuck shape, he might just let it over rotate, but really strong body hold and enabled him to keep a very straight line and get a good rip entry. Now a young man that had a very successful junior event last year, came second at the Junior Worlds and won gold at the Junior Europeans as well. So some amazing performances from him in the junior events. He's here on the senior stage now, kicking off his list with a forward double arm stand somersault with pike position. It's just 2.4 this one. Execution is very important. But very nicely executed from Jordan. Beautiful rip entry through the water. You can see why he's doing so well in the junior events. Great to see him here, gaining that experience alongside some of our incredible divers. Hopefully looking to follow in the footsteps of them. Now Kyle starting with his arm stand rotation. This is a dive that we've seen Kyle do in numerous different selections. He's done the back arm stand somersaulting dives. He's done the forward arm stand twisting dives. And now he's opting today for a back arm stand double somersaults with 1.5 twist. This one's 3.2. Slightly lower down on the DDs that we've seen from him previously. But absolutely beautiful. Kyle's rip entries are incredible. He just goes through the water and leaves absolutely nothing to come back up. Disappears. I've been informed that he's in great form at the moment. Great to see. He's had his fair share of injuries, Kyle, rupturing both his Achilles in the last few years. Great to see him back and looking like on top form. So there are our rankings after the first round. We have 12 divers in the event. Our top 8 go through to the final. So back to our first diver, Angus, keeping his degree of difficulty at the 3.2, this time with the inward 3.5. Very nice from Angus again, steady diving. Made that with ease, piked out about 5 metres, had a little look from the water at the water, and then lined his hands up. Just potentially needed to squeeze his bum in a little bit more, so get a perfect straight line and go through with even less splash, but that's been heavily critical. Very nice dive from Angus. Now we have Hamish. Inward 3.5 somersaults. Took, same dive. Oh, real shame there, because the ankle pop out of the board was very, very good. You might notice some of the divers go up to their tiptoes, then drop their heels down and they spring off the board. Hamish there does a really, really great example of that. Just came out of the somersault a little bit early and left it short vertical. Now Matthew started off with a steady reverse 3.5, not the high execution marks that we know he's capable of. He's now up in the DD again to 3.6. Great dive from Matthew. It's a lot of dive, this one. 2.5 twists before you squeeze back into that somersault. When you come out of those 2.5 twists, it takes a lot of ab and core strength to squeeze yourself back into the pike shape. Now Brianne. Still up on that 10 metre. Got 4 divers doing dives not on the 10 metre, so all of the other divers should qualify, with there just being 12 competitors after Oliver's pull out. Oliver Wignall from Southampton Diving Academy unfortunately had a bit of a training accident, so he did have to pull out just before the event started. It just does show the incredible danger that's associated with the 10 metre diving. Oh, absolutely disappeared through the water. Really impressive there from Brian. He's slightly short of vertical, so sometimes you would expect a bit of splash to be thrown up, but the way he works his body line and his hands through the water just completely disappears still. Ben Cutmore. He follows up his big DD opener with an inward 3.5 somersaults tuck, and slightly down to 3.2 compared with his 3.6 to kick off his event. A very nice dive from Ben. Nearly said before it that this is one that I would come to expect him to nail in a competition. He's very aware, he's got good entries, good form. His diving is very aesthetically pleasing to watch. Try and avoid saying it now before the competitors do their dives. in order to stop putting a jinx on him. Now Robbie, forward 3.5 somersaults piked. Another good dive there. Robbie, again, having some great results in the junior meets. He came third at the Junior Worlds and the Junior Europeans. So medaling at those events is, again, an amazing achievement. Similar to some of our divers, he's very springy, spinny, can make some of the big dives, and he's got great hands too. I think our camera's just missed that one. Oliver down on the 5 metre for the back 2.5 somersaults duck. Our apologies for that one. The mix up in the platforms, I think, has thrown us slightly. Next up, Noah with the inward 3.5 somersaults tuck. Oh, that's a bit of a shame from Noah. Similar to Ben, I expect him to get high execution marks on this dive. It's so easy for him though. He's just gone sailing over from vertical. Still came out through a pike shape at about 5 metres, but just tucked his chin in slightly. Rotation just carried on. And then thrown up a bit of splash. So, bit of a shame there from Noah after a great start on his opening dive. Now Romano with 3.5 somersaults tuck. Very good finish from Romano. A little bit sneaky on the finish. We saw Noah come out through a pike shape. Call that the pike out. Romano opts to go from the tuck shape straight to the straight shape. So sometimes that can be referred to as the punch out. Both effective. And Romano has managed to sneak that nice rip entry in with his punch out of his shape. That is the reason, though, we do see the lower scores. Just the punch out often reflects a bit of a lower finishing dive, the pike out, and the divers are finishing a little bit higher. Now Oliver, back on the 10 metre. He's got a reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck on his first round dive, which was on the 7 metre. Oh, that's a shame there from Oliver. He's got good rip entries as he's shown throughout this weekend. So this dive is one of those dives that gives you a real opportunity to show off that rip. Unfortunately there, we've just, when he came out of his shape, just lost a lot of tension in his body. Now our second to last diver, Jordan. He's on the 10 metre for this one. Drops down to the 5 metre for his next dive. But for now, on the 10 metre with a forward 3.5 somersaults pike. Clearly building up his dives up to get all the way up to the 10 metre. Nearly there from Jordan. Great pike shape again. When these divers are spinning around in a pike shape, things to look out for are those arms being wrapped around the back of their knees, slightly rounded in the back, but their chest being on their legs with good leg line and toe point. Jordan had all those attributes, just came out of his shape a little bit too late and over-rotated. Now Kyle, an absolutely amazing rip entry on his back arm stand diving the first round. I think it'd be fair to say that Kyle's forward and inward spinning dives are usually quite reliable. Back and reverse are the ones that are a little bit more up and down at times. But steady there from Kyle. He makes these dives so easily. He's one of the fastest spinning divers, not only in the country but in the world. Just the challenge there on his back and reverse, or kicking his feet out and having the confidence to not arch his body and keep his stomach tight and flat and line up his dive, and that'll see him get the big scores. But he holds the top spot there, as you can see. Ben Cutmore, his synchro partner, very close behind. Noah Williams, Matthew Dixon, Robbie Lee following up. All of our divers that are competing a full 10-metre list will therefore be going through to the final. 12 divers, 4 that have got dives on the 7-metre or the 5-metre in their list, so that will mean that they can't go through to later on's final. It is a requirement that every dive in these divers' list has to be on the 10-metre. Angus with his arm stand. He's going for the forward double somersault pipe. Again, steady diving from Angus. His first 2 dives were up on 3.2 degree of difficulty rating. That one's dropped quite significantly down to 2.4. Sure, he'll be looking to increase the difficulty of his arm stand dives in the near future. In his hometown pool, so should be very used to the surroundings, Angus. Hamish has got his arm stand selection. He's opted for a forward somersault, so again low on the degree of difficulty at 1.9. Be interesting to see how the judges deal with that. It's important for our divers to show that they have got a comfortable and controlled balance on the end of the board, whether that means having a 1 to 2 second hold before taking off. Hamish just got up to the handstand and straight away went off, so that's why you see the lower scores from the judges. Keeping with the arm stand trend, we see a very different arm stand from Matthew. Facing backwards this time. And he's going with the triple somersault in the tuck position. So as you can imagine, that means the degree of difficulty jumps right up. This one's 3.3 compared with the last 2 divers at 1.9 and 2.4. Great dive from Matthew. Been great to watch Matthew over the last few years. He's obviously now turned into a big, strong and quite tall platform diver. When he was growing up, he was always known as Little Chewy from quite a few regions of the country and the world. Now, very different statured man, but still showing some amazing diving. Sometimes can be a challenge when divers go through development and their bodies change to keep doing the same things. Matthew is definitely doing that. He's upped his DD as well. And now it's Brian. He's doing the back 1.5 somersaults with 2.5 twists. So we've seen this dive with the 2.5 somersaults with the 1.5 twist. He's switching it up. Good dive from Brian. As you can imagine, with just having 1.5 somersaults and 2.5 twists, you need to ensure that you set the somersault quite slow. If you go too fast, then by the time you've completed your 2.5 twists, you are already too over-rotated for the 1.5 somersaults. Brian does that very well. Tees his arms to stop his twist. And then, again, we can hear that good rip sound through the water. Another big dive from Ben. Back double somersault with 2.5 twists. So again, we're seeing the arm stand selection, but seeing some very different dives, which is always good to see. A bit of variety. This one's 3.6, so again, up even more. One of the highest DD dives in the competition. Again, very accurate from Ben. Upright and clean through the water. See how the judges penalised just that little leg split. They penalised him quite heavily on the back 2.5 somersaults with 2.5 twists. Similar there, good rip entry, just need to squeeze those feet together throughout the twists. Now Robbie. Back 3.5 somersaults in the tuck position. Good dive from Robbie. Seen him do this dive and absolutely disappear through the water. So that one just over-rotated very slightly, which is hard to keep the water down. If you watched the women's 3 metre earlier, talked about the knee save when the divers go through the water on a back and reverse entry. If their legs are slightly over, they can pull their knees in, and that just ensures keeping the water down a little bit. Now Oliver, apologies for missing his last dive. He's back up on the 10 metre now with a very nice back twist. 3.2, I believe, is the highest in his list. Good dive there from Oliver. Now Noah Williams came 5th at the World Championships last year with a good score of 479. Not too far off the Chinese diver in the 3rd place either, so great international performances from him. Another nice dive there. Got a slight drop in the last round on his inward 3.5, which is pretty uncharacteristic of him, but recovered there. I think he'd still probably expect more of himself in the final later on, but for a prelim, I think he'll be pretty happy with that one. Sometimes it's important for these guys to just dust the cobwebs off the first event of the year. Obviously, it will affect selections, so they still need to perform to ensure that they put themselves in the forefront of the performance directors and the selection team's mind. Now Romano, steady diving so far. He's got a reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. And carries on in exactly the same fashion. Good rip entry through the water, good kick out from his tuck shape. Maybe just to get those extra little bits of marks from the judges. Have a little bit more balance, get the dive close to the board by swinging his arms right behind his ears. That'll just enable him to get the balance that the judges want and also an extra little bit of height as well. Now Oliver, he's back on the 7 metre for the remainder of the competition. He's got a back 2.5 somersaults tuck here. That's a shame from Oliver, similar to his reverse 2.5, to be honest. When he kicked out, instead of ensuring he keeps his tummy and glute tension, just has a little bit of a loose kick and slightly twists, which is why the judges are going to heavily penalise you. If they can see both legs and a hip drops, have the right to take a few marks off. Now on the 5 metre Jordan. He has 2 dives that aren't on the 10 metre, so well on his way to having that full 10 metre list despite being such a young lad. I've already mentioned his junior antics going so well, and you can see exactly why. It's a beautiful dive from Jordan. That looks like it has the potential to transfer up to the 10 metre and be a beautiful inward 3.5 as well. So great signs from him. Our last diver of the third round, Kyle, was the leader after the last round. He's gone in with 3.5 somersaults tuck. Oh, wow. Wow, I think we're going to see some big scores for that one. Beautiful dive from Kyle. Not much to pick out from there. I think if you gave that a 10, no one would particularly argue with you. Great dive from Kyle. So, at the midway point, here are our standings. Kyle extending his lead at the top. Slight gap opening up between Ben in 4th and the rest of the pack. Some good diving also from our more junior divers. Angus averaging 50 points a dive so far, so very steady. 150 points after 3 dives. Can he up that average? Oh, that's a shame. I don't think he is going to be able to up the average there. Just over-rotated. A lot to like about the dive. Great pike shape again. Kicked his feet out in a nice dish shape, just then instead of holding, just reached his arms back too far and couldn't stop the spin speed. Next up, Hamish. Similar with a 2.5 somersaults, this time in the reverse direction and the tuck position. 2.8 compared to 2.9, slightly easier. Very well held there from Hamish. When he kicked his feet out, I thought that they might potentially be too high, but lined up quite early. So just that extra length in his body line just helped him slow the dive down. Obviously, the further away your body is from its centre of mass, the slower dive will spin. So by him just grabbing a little bit earlier, he slows his rotation down and manages to just keep it upright. Now Matthew, inward 3.5 somersaults tuck. His lowest degree of difficulty dive in his list, but one that we're used to seeing him get very high execution marks on. We've just seen exactly that from Kyle. I think we'll see similar from Matthew. Very nice. Not quite the rip entry that we saw from Kyle. The somersaults and the pike out are very good. Definitely capable of going through that water a little bit cleaner is Matthew. So another new arm stand variation from Brian. We've seen the back arm stands previously. We haven't seen any in the pike position as yet. Brian will show us the first of those with a back arm stand double somersault pike. This one's a 2.8 degree of difficulty. And steady there from Brian, just left it slightly short of vertical. Again, I spoke earlier about the handstand having to show a 2-second hold-ish, just to basically show the judges that you are confident and comfortable and controlled in your handstand. Fortunately there, we just saw the handstand drop off from Brian straight away, so the judges give the low scores. Now Ben, we've had the loudest shouts in the crowd from Ben so far today. He's very heavily supported. Back 3.5 somersaults tuck. Oh, that's a shame from Ben. Just left it, didn't get those arms back behind his ears. So you can see those feet kick off the water, throwing up quite a big splash. From Southampton, Robbie Lee. 3.5 somersaults took. Wow. Robbie piked out his feet up at the ceiling then, so early out. That reflects how easily he makes this dive. Again, potentially not quite the rip entry that we know Robbie's capable of. You can see there, I spoke about the stress that platform diving, or diving in general, puts on your body. Robbie's got his wrist guards on, his back taped up. Now Oliver, forward arm stand, double somersault pipe. There you can see the slight pause in the straight line in the handstand before he pushes off to do his dive. That gives the judges the confidence that he is controlled. This has been a round of a few arm stand variations again. Noah's going for the same variation as his teammate Ben Cutmore. This is the highest degree of difficulty of all the arm stand variations that we're going to see. 3.6 degree of difficulty. Back arm stand double somersault with 2.5 twists. Very nice from Noah. The challenge of this dive again is with the 2.5 twist, as you're rotating quite fast out of the arm stand, difficult to square up the twists and show that the judges that you're completely finished on the 2.5 twists and not over rotated either. Noah does that really, really well. He repikes and tees his arms out to stop that twist and then finishes the dive off. And Romano is next up. The good thing about this platform event is we do see different dives. He's going for the back 3.5. So we see different dives, different order, different selections. Obviously it gives us a nice variety of dives to watch, depending on your preference. And this one's done well. It can look really, really good. And again, Romano, very impressive with his consistency today. All of his dives have been very steady. Back 3.5 is a lot of dive, especially for a young man like Romano. More strapping on the triceps there. Didn't even mention that as one of the ailments that you can get. Clearly a lot of impact on the tricep muscles when you're squeezing your elbows and locking your arms out. Oliver just throwing his chamois down there, didn't quite get all the way down to the floor. The divers use the chamois just to enable them to dry their legs, so when they are spinning round in the shapes, the legs don't slip apart or their hands don't slip off their legs if they're making the shape. Oliver with his back twisting dive there. Didn't quite get his hips all the way out on the lineup, so just stayed slightly piked. That's why we don't see the higher scores. Jordan, the young man, helping his fellow competitor there by throwing his chamois down for him, so that's very nice and sportsmanlike from Jordan too. Previously mentioned, there isn't much animosity in diving competitions. Most of the divers tend to be very sportsmanlike and support each other. It's an individual competition, and obviously the best man wins. Wow, very nice from Jordan. Really impressed with him today. He's just got the one chance this morning with his dives being on the 5 and 7 metre, but he's really, really taking that to show off to everyone here and all the managers and directors of the British diving programme that he's not just here to make up the numbers, he's here to put on a show. So the dive that we've just seen from Jordan, the back 2.5 somersaults tuck, eventually will hopefully turn into this one. Kyle's back 3.5 somersaults tuck. This one's 3.3. Oh, that's more like it from Kyle. I mentioned on the reverse, when he kicks his legs out, he needs to be confident, stay straight, line up, and then we'll see the big scores. He does just that here. Kicks his feet out very early, as he needs to, because he spins so fast. Holds them and absolutely drills the entry. So, the results after the 4th round. Again, Kyle remains in the lead. You can see some slight gaps starting to open up between the different rankings. Now Angus, currently in 8th position. I said normally top 8 would go through to the final. There are 12 competitors in this, but 4 of them are competing dives that are on the 5 and 7 metre, so as I've previously mentioned, just to remind you, they won't be able to go through to the final. Oh wow, great dive from Angus. Another good jump out of the platform, kicks his feet out with a solid disposition, holds that tight and then drills the entry too. Great dive from Angus. Hamish Patel, the back 3.5 somersaults tuck. This dive is his hardest dive of his list, 3.3 degree of difficulty. Oh, with that difficulty comes that extra risk. Unfortunately for Hamish, hasn't quite paid off there. It's a lot of dive when you're spinning around in the air. To be able to know where you are, divers have different techniques. Some divers spot, look for different things in the building, maybe the water, the platform, a sign, anything like that. Some others feel when their hips and their head is rotating, and some have a combination of the two. It's a real skill to have the spatial awareness to know when you come out of your somersaults. Matthew's doing the same dive but in the pike position, so goes from 3.3 to 3.6, quite a big jump up in degree of difficulty. And again, steady from Matthew. Nothing really hit this morning, but also no big dramas either. Just let his hips stick out at the end. Didn't quite squeeze his glutes in enough to get that body line to see the rip entry that we're used to seeing from him. Well, it's a lot of dive that, especially when you've had to train early in the morning. Your body's potentially not as awake as it's going to be in the final later on. Joints and muscles haven't quite loosened up enough. Now Brian, forward 3.5 somersaults tuck, 2.7. Wow, again, Brian, great rip entry. Such a great sound when the divers hit the water from that 10 metre board. You can hear it like a bullet entering the water. These divers hit the water at such high speeds from up there on the 10 metre board. when they're in the right positions, they can have that effect to just really wow everyone watching. Ben's doing the same dive, but in the pike position. Beautiful dive from Ben. We saw Ben do this with an extra somersault last year. Forward 4.5 somersaults, so we know he's capable of doing that, and I know in the near future he's going to be looking to put that back in, but for now, I think it's a very smart decision for him to just show his class. Make sure that forward 3.5, the 107, is done very, very well, like he's just done. Robbie Lee with his reverse 3.5 somersault tuck. Well, 3.4 compared to the back 3.5, which is 3.3. A lot going on there from Robbie. Again, when he gets into his tuck shape, he just motors so quick in his spin speed. A few techniques to just tidy up on the takeoff, just enable him to get a little bit more height, keeping that belly tight, not throwing his head back. Now Oliver on the 7 metre. Again, this is a dive that could be seen as a lead up to the one that we've just done on 10 metre previously. Reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. Quite a common process for some of the young divers like Oliver is to do this dive on 7 metre, reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck, then drop it down to the 5 metre, and then go up to the 10 metre with an extra somersault, like Noah is doing here. Reverse 3.5 somersaults. So that can be the skill chain of development that a lot of the younger divers will go through, and the likes of Noah have gone through. Oh, Noah's spring out the platform there is just incredible. He's jumped so high, gets into a beautiful tuck shape. Just mentioned previously about the spatial awareness being one of the hardest skills to have. Of course, Tom Daly, one of the most well-known divers ever. That was one of the things that he was always so incredible at. He just knew exactly how to land on his head, and his hands weren't so bad either. Now Romano. Been very impressed with him so far today. Very consistent. Again, very steady for Romano. Maybe not quite sharp as some of his other dives. Bit of neating, tidying to do there. Making sure he's locking his knees out nice and tight. Just will help get those extra few marks from the judges. But again, I've been very impressed with him so far today. Consistency is one of the hardest things to do in diving. Now Oliver with a low degree of difficulty dive, 1.8 on the 7.5 metre board. Very nicely executed though. Showed his balance to the judges. Then little repike and lined up nicely through the water. So Jordan's back on 10 metre for his last two dives. Starts off with the reverse 2.5. Another dive that's been very impressive. Some excellent dives so far. Such a young man. Already mentioned his accolades in the junior events last year. Won the junior elites in Group B. Won the junior Europeans in Group B. And came second at the junior world. So some really impressive results. First 2.5 somersaults tuck on the 10 metre. And continues in exactly the same vein of form. Very, very good diving. Really looking forward to seeing how he progresses in the coming years. Great potential. Now it's time for our biggest dive of the competition. 3.7. You've seen this dive on the 3 metre with the men a couple of days ago. It's 3.8 down on the 3 metre. It's 3.7 on the 10 metre. So forward 4.5 somersaults in the tuck position. See if you can count Kyle turning around here. Oh no, that's slightly uncharacteristic of Kyle. Despite it being a 3.7, this is actually one of the dives that would usually expect Kyle to do quite well. He's very consistent with it in training. Also, he's got a good reputation of pulling it out in a competition too. Although it is the dive that he's unfortunately had some bad accident with in the past, rupturing his Achilles when he did it in Canada a few years ago. So that sees the top of the rankings change up a little bit. Noah now up in the lead. And there are our 9th to 12th divers after our 5th round. So we're now into the last round of stuff for the men's 10 metre prelim. Angus finishes off his list with a forward 3.5 somersaults pike. 3.0. Started off his list, interestingly, with his hardest dives. Very nice from Angus. You can potentially see why he put that last. A dive that he knows that if it needs to, if he sees a score that he wants to get, or if he's chasing someone, or someone's chasing him, he can put that dive in very nicely. And he does just that there. The different tactics of the dive orders can be quite important. Sometimes if it's close going into the last round and you're down on the degree of difficulty, then you put yourself at obvious disadvantage. Good dive there from Hamish. Great recovery from the last round. Back 3.5. Didn't quite go as he would have liked it to, but finishes off really, really strongly there with his back 2.5 somersaults, 1.5 twisting dive. Slight variation of our scores there from our judges. That is, however, why we do have the choice to get rid of the top 2 and the bottom 2. Just means that any ones that are slightly out of the ordinary, any anomaly scores can be eradicated. So, time for Matthew's big one. I'm going to see this another time later on in the event from Noah. But for now, Matthew's forward 4.5 somersaults tuck. Hey, there we go. Great dive from Matthew. His hardest dive in his list, and I think the best executed one this morning as well. So, good one to put it together on. Big score there, 86.95 on his forward 4.5. Great dive from Matthew. Brian chooses to finish his dive list up with the reverse 2.5, so slightly lower down on the degree of difficulty, but judging on his dive so far, he's got good rip entries. This is a dive that you can really show that off on. Might be lower down on the degree of difficulty, but when it's done well, can be one that's really, really impressive to watch. There we see it, exactly what I was talking about. puts his feet out into a nice dish shape and just disappears through that water. That's why he's going to get an 8 there. Unfortunately, that 8 doesn't count. But great dive to finish up there from Brian. Now we can compare the 2.5 to the 3.5. So you've just seen the 2.5. Brian kicked his feet out nice and early to show he stopped his rotation. Ben's going to have to do an extra somersault here, so obviously a lot more work. Also gets rewarded by increasing the degree of difficulty up to 3.4, so big 0.6 jump up. Oh, and again, another very nice dive. Brian's 2.5, beautiful. Ben follows up with a 3.5 and again kicks his feet out. Perfect time, good entry through the water. Still a little bit of sharpness left from Ben compared to how he can enter the water. Bit of a bubbly entry compared to ones where he just disappears through the water, but again, a very, very nice dive from him. Another diver that opts for his highest degree of difficulty at the end is Robbie. 3.6 here with a back 2.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists. And despite it being his highest degree of difficulty, makes it look very, very easy. Twists so fast there and then just folds into a really impressive flat pike shape. You're only seeing the 5.5s there. I think that possibly might have just been slight over twist on the entry. I saw both legs as he entered into the pool. So some judges may just penalise him there with a 5.5 instead of going any higher. Oliver, his last dive forward, 3.5 somersaults took. And another very, very nice dive to finish up on. I mentioned previously about putting a dive at the start of your list that you're comfortable with and then potentially a dive at the end of your list that you're confident on scoring high on. Seems to me that that is the case for a lot of these divers. We've seen a really good round so far. Interesting to see again. We saw Ben follow up Brian with a reverse 3.5 compared to reverse 2.5. We're now seeing Noah follow up Oliver with a forward 4.5, adding a somersault onto Oliver's forward 3.5. Steady from Noah. Again, not a massive hit for him. You can definitely do this dive for much higher execution marks, but if you don't do it and absolutely nail it, the important thing is to ensure that your slight drop still keeps putting points on the board. There's a big difference between dropping a dive for a 4 and dropping a dive for a 5.5, 6 like Noah's just done. Romano's last dive is a back 2.5 somersaults with 1.5 twist. I've already mentioned that this is a 3.2. It used to be a 3.4. Similar thing on the 2.5 twist. That is a 3.6. Used to be a 3.8. The governing bodies do have a review of the degree of difficulties, and they can choose to change dives if they feel necessary. Romano continuing his fashion of being very impressive this morning. Consistent diving all the way through, and that one I think is probably the highlight in terms of execution marks. 68.8 points. Great form throughout that one as well, not just the consistent upright entries. So 3 divers left in this morning's prelim. Oliver's had a list that's included 1 dive on the 10 metre and 5 dives on the 7 metre, so this is his last one on the 7.5 metre. Forward 2.5 somersaults pike. He's going for a running takeoff. We've seen this done with a standing takeoff previously in different events. Oliver with a very nicely executed forward 2.5 on the 7 metre there. And the last diver for the very impressive Jordan Fisher-Eames. Sure, we've got big things to come from this young man. I, for one, I've really enjoyed watching him this morning. He's got real class. You can see he's worked very hard on his technique with his coach. And again, a nice dive, not quite up to the standard of his first 5, just left that one slightly short of vertical. But having said that, this is the hardest one in his list, so that may to be expected. Overall, a very, very good event from Jordan. Should be very proud of himself to come into this senior event and still manage to keep that quality up. Can be very daunting going against the guys that competed internationally all around the world. I've already mentioned the accolades that some of them do have to their names, so to come and hold your own at this event is a great achievement from him. Kyle finishes off his dive list and this morning's prelim with a back 2.5 somersaults with 2.5 twists. And finishes it off very well. That one slight drop on the forward 4.5, or probably a bit more than a slight drop. I don't think Kyle would mind me saying. Just let him down a little bit, but still gets over that 400-point mark with a great finish there. So that concludes our men's 10-metre platform prelim. Also concludes all of the prelims for all of the events at this year's British National Diving Cup. We will obviously have the finals later on, kicking off with the women's 3-metre, and then the last event of this year's event being the one that we've just seen. So hopefully we can see some more great dives, some sharpening up. Hopefully the judges feeling generous this afternoon. Maybe we'll see those big marks. Hopefully we can potentially see that illustrious 10 that is so exciting to see. We'll have the final results coming for you very shortly. My apologies for that break. I think we are now ready to show you the results. As you can see on your screen, Matthew Dixon, the top qualifier for later on's final. Him, Kyle and Noah all getting over that 400-point mark. Matthew and Noah both capable of scoring over 500 as they've done in the past, so potentially see some higher scores in the final. From our list there, we have Brian, Oliver, Romano, no, sorry, not Romano, Oliver Heath and Oliver Covell, as well as Jordan Fisher-Eames, that all did dives on the 5 or the 7 metre, so they won't be through to our final. All of the other divers in that list will be back later on for the men's platform final. So we will be returning at 3 o'clock, kicking us off with the afternoon's events with the women's 3 metre, so hope to see you later, and we hope some more great diving this afternoon.